Good day guys, it's DanMinigun from Mushroom Cloud Gaming bringing you another video. This video is about why Battlefield 1 is easily my favorite out of all the Battlefield games. Now I've played all of the Battlefield games except for Battlefield Vietnam and 2142, though I would like to add that with Battlefield 1942 and Battlefield 2 I mostly played them single player, so I didn't really experience the multiplayer that much because, well, I was really young and I couldn't afford any of those games. So, without further delay, let's go over some features which I think sometimes go under the radar when talking about Battlefield 1. Let's start with an obvious one, or I hope it's obvious. Reason number 1. Battlefield 1 is not a minimap shooter. What is a minimap shooter, you might ask? Well, in BF4 and BF3, unless one has a suppressor equipped, when they fire their weapon they would show up on the minimap. Not only will they expose their position, but also their orientation. This means that a player who just was looking at the minimap can tell what the other player is doing through a wall. In Battlefield 1 this simply does not exist. This undoubtedly increases the skill ceiling, as good attentive players will actually use their senses and identify the best situations to engage in combat, instead of just looking at a minimap enlarged to 200%, praying for them not to notice you. The second one is much simpler. It is the damage indicator. In Battlefield 1 it actually tells you how much damage you're doing in a numerical sense. If you're doing 23 damage, then you're doing 23 damage, you will be awarded 23 hit points. I meant score. Not only does this make it fair to people who do the most damage, it also acts as a useful tool to identify how many more bullets you have to shoot. The third reason is simply the Frontlines game mode. This game mode has been very well received to the point that it has transitioned from a DLC game mode to a vanilla one, and this change was rather fantastic. The actual game mode is a mixture of rush and conquest. But at the same time, it really doesn't play like any of those, except for the last part. The flag burn is very large, and the teams can move back and forth with no clear attacker or defender. This makes for some really dynamic games, far more so than other game modes. The player count of 32 is actually a perfect player count, because it is not too low like in Rush and it's not too high like in Conquest. Perhaps even pushing it a bit further, like 40 players, would also be good, since we don't have 40 player operations anymore, which is rather unfortunate. The fourth reason is another simple one. There are no lock-on weapons in BF1. Well, this is pretty obvious since there were no lock-on weapons in World War I, but let's not assume that Battlefield adheres to reality. I didn't hate lock-on weapons per se, I just preferred a more analog feel, as the developers actually said in a very concise manner. And really I don't have much more to say about that, really, it's personal preference. I just don't like lock-ons. The fifth reason is simply the expanded movement system. Movement system in Battlefield 1 is simply the best we have ever had. Sure, it has its fair share of legacy problems, as there's not being able to vault over stuff or vaulting over mid-air, which is extremely annoying. But we can also climb over walls, into trenches and out of trenches, so we can actually have a more parkour-like style of gameplay. This of course doesn't increase the speed of the gameplay, it just makes it more easy to get around the map. Now the sixth one is surely to be controversial. I actually like the elite classes. I think they are a mix of infantry and vehicles and operate better at the squad level. They also have some useful traits, such as the flamethrower being able to clear bunkers, and the sentry MG, who can pin down snipers and eliminate them without being too exposed to their one-hit kill sweet spot, which incidentally is one of my least favorite things about the game. There are however some shortcomings to the elite class that can make them a bit more frustrating than they should be. I have covered this topic in the past, so I will not get into it. I'll link the video in the description below. The seventh reason is easily the biggest reason why I prefer BF1. It's the weapon and class balance. The class balance, well, there is actually a class balance now, since you can just run around with an Ace-23 and medkit all day, dominating infantry with ease. The actual weapons have a higher skill curve because they require more input than just clicking the mouse fast. Yes, LMGs are mouse button one for the most part, but the time it takes for them to become accurate balances this out. It's not like BF4 had any more complex bursting mechanics on LMGs, since they were pretty much 200 round assault rifles. This feeds into another thing about the weapon and class balance. It makes the game overall slower. And this is a great thing in my opinion. I have always felt like BF3 and to a lesser extent BF4 were too fast and rewarded reactionary play more than precautionary. BF4 had a good mix of both, but BF3 definitely did not. Battlefield 1 actually feels closer to the original Battlefield, which is called Battlefield 1942 and not Battlefield 1. There's a pun in there somewhere. The classes are much more interdependent on each other. They rely more on each other because their effective ranges are fairly limited to their role. The only thing I don't like about the class balance is that we've retained the idea that the Scout has sniper rifles. I'm a strong believer that sniper rifles or bolt-action rifles in general are really difficult to balance without either making them near useless, mediocre or just plain overpowered. Battlefield 1 does straddle the line to overpowered in my opinion, though thankfully with the TTK patch, this is somewhat resolved due to the increased power of the medic and LMGs. Another point I would like to make, which probably is controversial to many, is that I actually like Battlefield 1 vehicles much better than BF4. Their much slower pace and clunkier feel makes them more distinct from one another. There are many vehicles which require a very high level of teamwork. These include the bomber, heavy bomber and land ship. Sure, Battlefield 4 had the attack chopper and scout chopper, which required a high degree of teamwork. However, in Battlefield 1 there are vehicles which are completely specialized in teamwork. This vehicle is almost useless without a good squad, but with a good squad it is near unstoppable. I also prefer the infantry to vehicle dynamic in BF1, because infantry, if they can get close enough, can do a tremendous amount of damage to vehicles. You could do this in BF4 as well, but BF1 vehicles, being slow and clunky, have exploitable weak spots. For example, the land ship is completely blind in the area behind the sponson cannons. Many vehicles can also be disabled by a single explosive such as the limpet mine. You can disable tracks, sponsons, side guns, you name it, and it's actually very useful in damaging a vehicle and running away. I also think there are more anti-tank options for classes, since there are K bullets, light anti-tank grenades for everyone. The support has the HE mortar and limpet charge. If anything, I think the support is also an anti-tank class, just one that is less reactionary than the assault. Finally, I have to talk about this. It's Battlefield 1's magnificent setting. And yes, I said the word magnificent. The World War I setting really gives us something unique and really something we've never seen before. We can see cavalry alongside tanks that we've never seen in an FPS game before. Not only that, but being Battlefield, the level of quality is astounding. The choice to include many prototype and rarely seen weaponry is actually a very good thing in my opinion, because not only does it keep to Battlefield's arcadey nature in the sense that it prefers gameplay over realism, it also gives us weapons we've never seen before. Take the Hewitt or the Cherogati, weapons that have never appeared in any other game before, much less one with such a high level of polish and graphical fidelity. I honestly don't know of many games that lets you float around in a baby airship, taking on World War I dogfighters whilst a raging naval battle is going on below, and this I'm referring to Heligoland Bight. The theme is actually explored quite well, with multiple factions spanning all of World War I, not just focusing on the Western Front. I think the most interesting takeaway I have from Battlefield 1 is that I actually learned a lot about the Great War. And this is very evident in the subscriber bases of popular channels such as the Great War channel, which covers World War I in great detail, and of course Forgotten Weapons. It is very clear that the release of Battlefield 1 has spurred a lot of interest in researching the history of World War I and also its lesser known aspects. And I think this is something quite fantastic, and something that previous World War II games have also done. In a way, the Great War was actually a very forgotten conflict, and many stereotypes exist about it which are flat out wrong. But anyway, that's really beyond the scope of a Battlefield video, but it's something I appreciate nonetheless. I hope you've enjoyed my list. If you have any qualms about it or any other things you like about Battlefield 1, please comment down below. I would love to read all of your comments and suggestions. This has been DanMinigun from Mushroom Cloud Gaming, High Priest of the Spreadless Church of Hewitt. May Hewitt's light shine upon you all.